workforce competencies so that there's a higher return on investment. And in order to do all this, you also have to kind of address the process stability and project stability issues, because having a process definition is not the thing that really causes instability. It is the people factors which is lacking in the organization which actually causes the instability in the process. So nobody ever complains that not having a defined process is the reason why they have so much of instability in the project. Okay? So we will see what are the other issues. Now for the core of the 5 process areas, I'm going to kind of explore at a reasonable depth what these 5 process areas are, and explore how to best exploit the synergy between high maturity implementation and the 5 PCMM process areas. We'll literally get our hands dirty, and thankfully I have a small group, which means I was able to get some white sheets of paper, which will be sufficient for this group. I would appreciate you taking a sheet and passing it along. Yeah. Now, the first process area is competency analysis, the purpose of which is to identify 3 things: knowledge, skills, and process abilities that are required to perform the organization's business activities so that it is used as basis to develop workforce practices. Now, this is a word-for-word duplication of the PCMM, because that's the purpose statement. Okay? Now we will understand what this means. Now, one of the things that this statement asks us to consider is to have a much more holistic or a systemic view of process improvement, where the focus is on knowledge, skills, and process abilities. So it's not just knowledge and skills. Whereas the CMMI constellations place emphasis only on the knowledge and skills aspect within organizational process focus and process definition, with organizational training coming into play. And of course, the generic practice 2.5. Now, I'm going to introduce 2 proprietary methods, the Sitara 10W5D competency hierarchy model. And the reason for 10W5D is it asks you to identify organizational competencies to span at least 10 wide competencies with 5 deep capabilities. And I'll explain what this 10W5D is with one example. So let us assume that one of the W's for this organization is program management. We all need program management in the organization, but do we have a sense for what it takes to say program management is a competency in our organization? So assume that there is a Stampy appraisal of program management. Do we get a level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? Okay. So in order to structure this thought process, what we have is, for every identified competency, you must conceive at least 5 deep capabilities. Okay. So product specification, this is from a real life example from an organization which did PCMM and CMMI together, high maturity organization, level 5 on the continuous representation, where in the days of version 1.2, they had at least 5 process areas operating beyond capability 4 and 5. Okay? And I would think they got these 5 process areas operating beyond capability 3, just capability 4 and 5, because they were successful in integrating PCMM. And this is from their competency dictionary. So in their context, program management meant these 5 deep capabilities: product specification, design management, product line management, programming language, and communication strategies. So at the organizational level, you have one of the competencies as program management, and you call it a competency only if and only if you have 5 deep capabilities for this model, for the Sitara hierarchy model. Okay? And how do you do this? How we do this is because the organizational competency description for program management becomes an organizational capability only if it's the collective capability of individuals. We deep dive into what we call the clusters, the competency clusters, and ask individuals to develop capabilities. So we now bring it down to the individual or the personal level, where this competency called program management gets stratified. Okay? And how is it done? So for example, for the program management competency to yield value to this organization, this organization thought it wise, based on brainstorming and understanding patterns of failure and why certain things were successful and why certain things were failures, they came up with this model. Individuals who are going to be assigned to the program management competency will be graded on 3 levels: learners, practitioners, and experts, based on this stratification. They need to have a required and an expected knowledge. The required was that they must have domain knowledge. They must have a product line expertise. They must know what after iPhone 5S. Is there going to be a 6S? And if it's a 6S, what is that 6S going to look like? Right? So that's the required, and the expected is you being able to do the market analysis. Until recently with iOS 6, you were not able to zoom into the video, in the video mode. With iOS 7, that has been fixed. And so many other things, okay? So you do a market analysis by asking what's the current limitation of the product line that we are building and put them as features in your future releases. So that's the expected competency. And you obviously have to do competition analysis. If Samsung is doing it, or if Samsung is copying it from us, what can we do different such that it'll be different in our context? Skills. The required skills are the conceptualization and breakthrough thinking. And expected is you expect engineers to be able to do prototyping, pretty much independent of any hand-holding. They must know programming. They shouldn't come into your organization and ask you how to spell Java. They better know what the programming language is all about. And then be able to model the business dynamic within the context of the software solution that they are trying to build. And then the processability part. This is pretty much taken care of, like I said, in the CMMI constellations. You are going to do that anyway when you're doing staffing of resources within project planning. But then this is the key thing. What are the additional process abilities which the organization must prepare individuals to possess if program management has to be a success? Again, here you have required and expected. They must be able to plan. They must be able to do a what-if analysis. There must be some decision analysis capability. And the expected is, how do you communicate about the product amongst yourselves? What type of interviewing and elicitation skills do you want to build in the organization? And how are you going to develop early proof of concept so that you fail early, right? So here, you might think of methodologies and such as well. Now, this is one aspect, and the 10W5D is one side of the story. And there's another process area called competency development, purpose of which is to constantly enhance the capability of the staff to perform their assigned tasks. So you went with competency analysis, came up with this profile for program management competency. How are you going to use that to develop and nurture that capability? How does a person who's starting out as a learner become proficient and then become an expert? Okay, so here is the crux of the whole thing. We have another model called the Star Domain Competency Sandwich. A skill without a context is a waste. A competency without a domain is a waste, right? So first of all, ask what is the domain we are operating in. It can be as broad as telecom or as finite as car insurance. Ask what is the domain that you're operating on, and then you go about asking what should be the competency profile by asking what knowledge should we have, what skills do we have, and what talents should we have to sustain the focus. Definitions, my definitions may not be the dictionary definitions. Knowledge is something that you can apply. I can teach you, you can learn. That's a body of knowledge that can plug and play. Skill, repeated application of this to make it fertile. You're able to use it with leverage. You're able to go back to past failure patterns to make sure that you don't commit the same mistakes. That's the skill. Talent, I take this definition from Marcus Buckingham, in his book, The Truth About You. It's an excellent book for all professionals. And what he states there as talent is an organized recollection of memory with which you can consistently perform to a certain ability. So it's an innate tendency in a person, right? So you need these three, and these three, fortunately, can be enabled through learning mechanisms, tools and technology, and techniques and processes. So you can develop your own techniques and processes, and that gives you some empowerment, which is what the PCNOM is all about. At level 4 and 5, you ask less of an SCPG to give you the definitions for process definitions, but you go about defining the gaps, whatever you perceive. That's the high maturity context of the PCMM. Now, this is how this organization, which did it so well. By the way, they went from level 3 to level 4 to level 5 in about 3 years on the CMMI dev. And they used PCMM only as a supporting process methodology. They were less interested in getting a Scampi appraisal. Okay? So they started with business objectives and they assigned it to certain departments, who then went about asking for what should the process improvement roadmap look like based on the staffing requirements that we have for the department. So that's where they bring in staffing. Now let me tell you what happens to project planning if you did it this way. Project planning automatically raises the bar to a very solid definition, because you're now integrating business requirements with who you want to have work for you in your organization. And you use that to define the job description, and then use the knowledge, skills, and processability profile from this job description to go back to your competency dictionary to get individuals who've been assessed using competency assessment centers to say that this is the person who fits the current competency requirement, and therefore you assign him to the project. If this didn't happen, if there was a mismatch between the job description that came out, like for instance, the knowledge expectation was 3, whereas the knowledge expectation was 1, meaning you wanted an expert, you only have a novice, then what you do is you take recourse to asking, from the CMMI perspective, whether the current process asset library has the definitions for competency-based practices with which we can train individuals to come up to speed to fill in the gap. If the answer is no, then you use the training program. There's a process area called training and development within PCMM. You can use organizational training in CMMI constellations. And also you can use work group development practices or the PCMM to go about getting this training gap fixed, and then use the data to make informed decisions about whether your process improvement program is working or not. This cycle, when it is repeated ad nauseum, consistently, with sponsorship, with good oversight, you get level 3 on the PCMM, and it's as simple as this. Now, just a quick poll. How many of you think you're not doing this already in your organizations? Okay? Yeah? How many of you are not doing this like how I described in your organizations? I have 2 hands going up. So which means the rest of you are probably no, not doing it. Okay. You probably need to conceive this type of an architecture if you want to even embark on level 3 definitions of the CMMI constellations. Because otherwise your organizational training is going to get whacked, right? Because the whole process area called organizational training is both tactical and strategic. And you want to delegate certain tactical trainings to individuals. It's for the individuals to go and get it from wherever. And the strategic part alone is part of the organizational responsibility. Okay? Now, let's get on to a hands-on activity. So all of you have a white sheet of paper. You didn't make it? Yeah, any extra papers, please pass it on. Got enough, or we need more? Yeah. You have enough? Okay, great. All right, let's do the crystal here. Now, I want you to do yourself a favor, okay, with this workshop exercise. It's a hands-on exercise. Now, I want you to name a competency that you are an absolute expert at. Okay? So some of you are appraisers, as I can see. So maybe appraising and auditing is your competency. And most of you are probably project managers, and you want to ask yourself, what about the project management competency you are an expert at? And name that competency here in the fill in the blanks. It can be any name that you want to give. It's a name of a company. It's for individuals, yes. Each of you do it as an individual exercise. And I have about 30 people approximately in this class, or in this workshop. We're going to roughly get to about 30 competency descriptions because you're the experts in that particular competency.